Hello guys, and welcome back to another History and Politics Thought video with me, Ryan Glavman. Today is episode 11 of the Gcse 91 Superpower Relations and the Cold War history topic. And I think we've got 3 more episodes after this actually, of the left of the series. So we're nearly at the end of this summary course. Remember, it should not be used in place of your teaching that you receive from school. It should be used as a company, sort of like a revision guide, if you like, to your studies that you have. But yes, I hope you're all well in this okay day. It's not too bad. It's an okay day, but I hope you're all well, coping well, keeping distances, doing the usual rules. Just another day, another day that seems the same to any other day at the moment, but hopefully it'll be changing soon. With all the schools and businesses starting to be reopened a bit more, maybe. Today I had a very full-on day at school, lot of talks, lot of work and everything to do with that as well, so that was quite interesting, but very full on. But regards to this, episode 11, remember John Lewis Gaddis, The Cold War, is a very good book, available on Amazon for £10. Gaddis does an excellent job of providing both the Soviet Union and US perspectives about the Cold War, uncovering detailed documents that weren't available to the public at the time but have been later released. And he uses a lot of images and illustrations to help you understand what the Cold War really was in terms of not just facts and statistics, but actually human lives and the actual events that happened. So I recommend reading that if you're interested. But today we're going to look at Gorbachev's New Thinking, which was a very important step in the Cold War, and it came in the 1980s when Gorbachev was elected. So he was leader of the Soviet Union from 1985 to 1991 when it collapsed, and he was the last leader of the Soviet Union. So not only was he one of the most progressive and one of the most liberal Soviet Union leaders they had, but he was also the last one, and his liberal values laid way to how the Soviet Union, once it collapsed, how it would restructure itself into Russia. I think it's Yugoslavia, actually, a bit into that as well. So he was very liberal. He was prepared to adopt policies to improve relations with the US, especially in terms of trade, and he wanted to improve this relationship as he knew that without doing this, the Soviet Union would collapse because of its growing inability to actually manage the eastern satellite states that were trying to revolt, and becoming more confident because they've seen other countries actually do this sort of uprising process and nearly work. So the US was accelerating its nuclear arms, whilst the Soviet Union was sort of plateauing and not producing as much at a fast enough rate as the US was. And also with the revolts that were going on in Eastern Europe, it didn't really help the situation. So Gorbachev's New Thinking actually, it was a way to respond to the concerns that many people had in the Soviet Union, and it was in the form of 3 strategies. First one being Postroika, which is basically the Russian word for restructuring, and it included economic reforms designed to make the Soviet economy more efficient and stable. It had become a little bit unstable as it had developed its nuclear arms, and a lot of money was being thrown into that process and those projects. And Gorbachev realised that actually, if the Soviet Union wasn't to collapse, it needed to have an economy that was stable. Because without a stable economy, you have no economy. Basically, economy is all about balancing and compromises between relationships of different businesses, different trade organisations, different countries. And without balance, you can't really hope for something not to collapse. So that was the first point. The second one was actually glasnost, which was part of the first point actually. It was basically the Russian word for openness, and it ensured censorship of the press was relaxed. So censorship of the press was something that was really a main feature of the Soviet lifestyle in the Soviet Union, and censorship basically means people, like police organisations, following what you're doing, a lot of communications, a lot of spying going on, and everything being detailed in vast documents, so it's very easy to catch someone doing something criminal, and that actually was relaxed, so that was a good part because it was too censored in the Soviet Union, and now it's becoming a bit relaxed. The second part to it, the end, ending the arms race with the USA. And Gorbachev began to sign various reduction agreements where they would, the US and USSR would agree to reduce their arms developments and capabilities. And through this, because of the slowing down of progress in nuclear arms in the Soviet Union, both countries, the US had exceedingly sped up its production of nuclear arms, but that was limited, and the Soviet Union was able to cope with this compromise because now they didn't have the worry of a really overpowering US nuclear project and nuclear ability to act whenever it chooses to. So this ended the arms race through a number of agreements, and it pleased the USA, who didn't actually want a nuclear war, just wanted to improve their developments for security in case something else did happen. And it pleased the USSR because obviously, like we said, there were weaknesses in their nuclear strategy. The last point was he stopped the Soviet interference in Eastern European states, such as Poland and Czechoslovakia, who had really quite, and Hungary actually, I think, where the uprisings were taking place prior to that. This was the first step actually in the decreasing power of the Soviet Union, and it was the first time that they actually recognised that they can't interfere as much in Eastern European states. These states had to be autonomous in some ways, otherwise they wouldn't be states in their own right, they would be part of something bigger, without any chance of any free actions that they choose to do. So Gorbachev's new liberal thinking and recognition of these satellite states being their own countries was a massive step forward for the Soviet Union, but actually at the same time it was a massive step backwards for the ideology that had been in place before, the ideology of taking over these countries and not allowing any freedom. But in terms of progressive politics and progressive historical movements within a union or a country, it was a good step forward for the Soviet Union. And as I mentioned earlier, there were some agreements. So these agreements came out with these summit conferences in the 1980s, such as the Geneva Conference in 1985, where the Geneva Accord was set up, and both countries, the USA and USSR, wanted to speed up these arms talks to ensure that reduction was in place very soon. So Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan promised to meet in the near future, and Ronald Reagan being the new president, he was very forward-thinking with nuclear ideas, and he wanted to end the Cold War. And this is where the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, or Ronald Reagan's Star Wars, comes into play. Basically, it was an initiative to try and threaten the Soviet Union into stopping their arms developments, or to concede the arms race, if you like, because now the US had a lot more power in outer space and their capabilities to fire nuclear missiles there, and it was a massive project, idealised, and it wasn't a mere concept, and it didn't actually take place, but it was a threat to the Soviet Union, and that was enough to force it to accept that actually they weren't going to keep up with the US, and it did ultimately lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union, but at the moment it was a good step forward. And the Washington Conference in 1987 was also a good step forward because the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty was signed, so the INF, which basically meant that some missiles were eliminated and no more production was taking place. So it eliminated the nuclear and conventional ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. And also under this treaty, both nations were allowed to inspect each other's nuclear stockpiles, basically, and they were allowed to see the numbers either reducing or increasing in terms of how many nuclear weapons they held. It was also the first treaty to reduce the number of nuclear missiles that superpowers possessed. So SALT 1, SALT 2 had limited the amount it could go further. However, this was the first time they actually reduced the number from where it was down below. And that reduction was the first time it happened in 1987. In 1990, Washington Conference was by Gorbachev and a newly elected President Bush of the US, and they agreed on the Treaty for the Reduction and Limitation of Strategic Arms, which is basically, the initials it had was START, S-T-A-R-T, but I didn't actually spell START, but ironically, that was the start really of the end of the Cold War because of the collapse of the Soviet Union. But the treaty itself meant that they both agreed to reduce their strategic forces, the nuclear top powers, if you like, over 7 years. So the idea was at that stage, each country would reduce its amount of nuclear technology and stockpiles, and then ultimately forces it could use over a period of 7 years. However, this became a bit less needed because of the Soviet Union collapsing altogether. The US didn't. I don't think the US really committed to that 7-year plan once it happened. But they were some of the conferences that happened, some of the agreements that took place because of Gorbachev's new thinking, his new liberal thinking about how the Soviet Union can exist, even though it has weaknesses. How can it address these weaknesses and exist as a union? And he believed the only way to do this was by allowing more Eastern European countries to have more freedom, and also by agreeing with the US compromises that both police the US side and the Soviet Union side. He accepted that the US had exceeded in their aim to be the most dominant nuclear force, and the Soviet Union had to accept that they weren't that, and that the US was. But because of Gorbachev's compromise and his acknowledgement of that, he was able to maintain a certain stability within the Soviet Union. Later it would collapse because of internal disputes. A lot more revolutions were happening in Eastern Europe, and it just couldn't be very politically stable for the Soviet Union to maintain its power. But at the moment, Gorbachev's new thinking was a very progressive step for the Soviet Union, and it looked as if it would sustain it, although we know it hasn't. It looked as if it would sustain the Union. So Gorbachev at this time was seen as a good Soviet leader, and one that actually, in some ways, stopped the Cold War from becoming a physical war. So yeah, that's today's video. That's episode 11. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like down below. Subscribe if you are new. Leave a comment if you enjoyed the video, or you've got more positive ideas maybe about what future videos I could do. Got 3 episodes left of this, and then we'll be free to do another series maybe, or just some other videos here and there. But thank you for watching, and I'll probably see you tomorrow or later today. Thank you for watching.